Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back in time, not to a world of fantasy, but to the very real, very gritty decks of a ship in the early 18th century. Imagine the salty spray on your face, the creak of timber beneath your feet, and the vast, unforgiving ocean stretching to every horizon. We're peeling back the romance of Hollywood pirates to uncover the stark, brutal, and often surprisingly dull reality of their lives. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, revealing why a man would choose a life of crime on the high seas, a life that almost always ended in a hangman's noose. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. I'd love to see you comment with where and when you started watching, or maybe just a kind word. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a thick, inescapable cocktail of damp, rotting wood, unwashed bodies, bilge water, and the faint, ever-present odour of tar. You're not a pirate. Not yet. Right now, you're a sailor, a hand on a merchant vessel, and your life is a repeating cycle of misery that makes you question your choices every single day. The floor beneath your bare, calloused feet is never truly steady. The ship, your entire world, is constantly heaving, rolling, and pitching with the whims of the ocean. You feel it in your bones, a deep, unsettling rhythm that you can't escape, even in your sleep. If you can call it that. Sleep is a luxury, stolen in short bursts in a cramped, dark forecastle with 24 other men, the air so thick with breath and damp wool you could practically swim through it. Your day began before the sun even thought about rising. A kick to your hammock and a gruff shout to your alarm clock. The work is immediate and relentless. You're scrambling up the rigging, the rough, tarred ropes scraping your hands raw. 100 feet above a churning, grey sea, with the wind trying its best to peel you from your perch, you balance on a single rope to furl a sail. There's no safety harness, no union representative to complain to. There is only the wind, the rope, and the very real possibility that a single slip means a quick, cold death. This isn't a weekend sailing trip. It's a high-stakes trapeze act you perform daily for pennies. Down on the deck, the work is no less brutal. You're hauling on thick, heavy lines until your muscles scream, your back aches, and your joints feel like they're filled with ground glass. Then there's the scrubbing. So much scrubbing. The decks must be holy stoned, a back-breaking process of scouring the wooden planks with sandstone and water, not for hygiene, but to prevent the wood from becoming too slippery with sea slime. And then there is the pump. The ship is always taking on water for hours. You and your mates work the heavy wooden handle of the bilge pump, a monotonous, soul-crushing task that feels as if you're trying to empty the ocean itself with a teaspoon. It's the 18th century equivalent of being on a stationary bike that powers the office lights. Pointless, yet mandatory. The discipline is as harsh as the sea. Your captain is a tyrant, a man whose word is absolute law. The slightest mistake, a knot tied incorrectly, a moment's hesitation in obeying an order is met with swift and brutal punishment. The most common tool for this is the cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip with 9 knotted leather cords. A flogging is a mainstream historical fact of life at sea, a ritual of humiliation and pain designed to keep everyone in line. You've seen men's backs turned into a raw, bloody mess for what seemed like nothing. You live in a constant state of low-grade fear, your head down, trying to remain invisible. The pay is insultingly low, but the real trick is that you rarely see it. At the end of a year-long voyage, the captain will present you with a list of deductions for your food, for your hammock space, for a new shirt you were issued. By the time he's done, your promised wages have dwindled to almost nothing. You've risked your life for a year for less than a pittance. This is the world you inhabit. A world of constant labour, constant danger, and constant hunger, ruled by the whims of a single man who holds your life and livelihood in his hands. But there are whispers. Quiet conversations in the dark of the forecastle. Stories of men who live differently, men who sail on their own terms, who share the risks and the rewards equally. They are called pirates, buccaneers, free men on the account. And while the authorities call them criminals, the stories you hear are of freedom. Some of the songs you sing while working, the sea shanties, have hidden meanings. On the surface, they are just work songs to keep rhythm, but it's a quirky tidbit of history that the lyrics were often a way to secretly complain about the officers and conditions, a small act of rebellion right under the captain's nose. Historians still argue whether the Royal Navy's practice of impressment, literally kidnapping men from shore or merchant ships and forcing them into military service, was a greater driver towards piracy than the awful conditions on merchant vessels. For you, the distinction is meaningless. Both paths lead to a life of servitude. Piracy. However, piracy seems to offer something else entirely. It offers a choice, a vote, a share, and as you stare out at the endless horizon from the deck of your merchant prison, that glimmer of a different life starts to look less like a crime and more like salvation. The thought has barely taken root in your mind, a dangerous seed of rebellion, when a lookout's shout shatters the midday calm. A sail on the horizon. But there's something different about this one. It moves with a predatory speed, and as it draws closer, you see it flies no national colours. A nervous energy ripples through your crew. The captain barks orders, his voice tight with a fear he's trying to conceal. But it's too late. The approaching ship is faster, more agile, and its intentions become terrifyingly clear as a cannon shot screams across your bow, a command to stop that needs no translation. Your merchant captain, for all his bluster and cruelty, is a businessman, not a warrior. He knows a losing fight when he sees one. With a curse, he orders the sails lowered. You're captured. You and the rest of the crew are lined up on the deck as the pirates swarm aboard. You expect monsters, the fiends from frightening bedtime stories. But the men who take your ship look like you. They are dressed in the same practical, ragged sailor's clothes, canvas trousers, loose shirts, their skin weathered by sun and sea. They are certainly more heavily armed, with pistols tucked into sashes and cutlasses at their hips. But the biggest difference is in their eyes. There's a confidence there, an air of ownership you've never seen among your own crew. They move with purpose, securing the ship with a practiced efficiency that is both terrifying and impressive. Their leader, the captain, ignores your own trembling captain, instead addressing the crew as a whole. His voice is calm, reasonable even. He explains that your ship, your cargo, now belongs to them. As for you and your shipmates, you have a choice. You can be put ashore on the nearest spit of land, with a bottle of water and no hard feelings. Or you can join them, become one of them, live a short life. Perhaps, but a merry one silver. Not the captain steps forward. He is the quartermaster, and you quickly learn he is arguably the most important man on the ship. He holds a roll of parchment, and in the sudden quiet, he begins to read. These are the ship's articles, the pirate code, and as he reads, a murmur of disbelief spreads through your ranks. It is a contract, the likes of which you have never imagined. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment, he reads. Every man shall have an equal share of fresh provisions and strong liquors. A vote? An equal share? This is madness. On your merchant ship, you had as much say in its running as a barnacle on the hull. The quartermaster continues. He lists the rules of compensation, a payout from the common stock for losing a limb in battle, so many pieces of 8 for a right arm, slightly fewer for a left, a detailed and gruesome early form of workers' compensation. There are rules of conduct too. No fighting amongst yourselves on the ship. All quarrels to be settled ashore with sword and pistol. Stealing from a fellow crewman is punishable by marooning. And then comes a truly quirky tidbit. A rule that seems almost comical in its puritanical strictness on this particular ship. Following the code of the infamous Bartholomew Roberts, there is to be no gambling with cards or dice for money. It seems pirates were fine with grand larceny on the high seas, but a friendly game of poker was a step too far. It's like running a criminal empire but having a strict policy against using office supplies for personal use. As you listen, you realise this isn't just a list of rules, it's a social contract. A declaration of independence from the tyrannical world you've always known. Scholars debate whether these articles were born from a genuine belief in radical democracy, or were simply a pragmatic tool to prevent the infighting that plagued earlier privateering ventures. But for you, standing on that deck, the academic distinction is irrelevant. It is a blueprint for a fairer world, offered by men the world calls villains. The quartermaster finishes reading. The choice is now. Those who wish to join will step forward and make their mark on the document. Those who do not will be gathered and set ashore. You look at your fellow sailors. Some are terrified, shaking their heads. They want no part of this. But others, you see the same spark in their eyes that you feel in your gut. The memory of the lash, the empty promises of pay, the endless, grinding misery. Here is the alternative. Laid bare, it is dangerous. Yes, but it is a life of agency. You hesitate for only a moment more, then you step forward. The quartermaster nods, a small smile on his face. He offers you the parchment. You cannot write your name, of course. Few common sailors can, so you do what the others are doing. You dip your thumb in a small pot of ink and press it firmly beside a clause. Your mark. Your oath. It's done. You have signed on. The pirates give a ragged cheer. You are given a swig of rum from a shared bottle, a fiery welcome into the brotherhood. Your old life is over. You are now part of this floating, democratic, and very illegal experiment. The rum is still warm in your belly, a fiery knot of initiation. Around you, the pirates move with an organised purpose that feels completely alien. They are looting your old vessel, but it's not the chaotic smash-and-grab affair you would have imagined. It's methodical. The quartermaster, the man who read the articles, stands by the rail, a ledger in hand, making notes as barrels of salted beef, coils of rope, and casks of water are hoisted aboard. The pirate captain, the fearsome man who led the charge, is helping to haul a line, sweating and grunting alongside everyone else. You watch this, puzzled. You've just seen him command an attack with absolute authority, but now he seems to have stepped down. An older pirate with a web of scars around one eye sees your confusion and grins, clapping you on the shoulder. Things are different here, lad, he rasps, his voice a gravelly whisper. Get used to it. And over the next few days, you begin to understand. You learn that the power structure on this ship is a masterpiece of checks and balances, born from a deep-seated hatred of the tyranny you just escaped. The captain is indeed the leader, but his authority is conditional. He's elected by the crew, and he holds absolute command only in the heat of battle and during a chase. The moment the fighting is over, his special powers dissolve, and he becomes just one of the boys again, subject to the same rules as everyone else. It's like having a project manager who's the unquestioned boss during a crisis, but the rest of the time, They have to get their coffee just like everyone else and can't take the last donut without consensus. The real power in the day-to-day running of the ship lies with the quartermaster. He too is elected, and his role is to be the crew's advocate, the guardian of their rights under the Articles. He distributes the food, the water, the rum, and the plunder. He settles minor disputes and acts as a sort of magistrate. He is the yin to the captain's yang, ensuring that no single man can ever accumulate too much power. This dual leadership is the central, mainstream historical fact of pirate organisation, a system designed to prevent the very abuses that made you turn pirate in the first place. You quickly realise that while the captain may hold the sword, the quartermaster holds the keys to the pantry, and you learn whose good side it's wiser to stay on. A few days later, you see this democracy in action. The lookout spots two ships to the west. One is a large, tempting merchantman, likely full of goods. The other is smaller, faster, and possibly a naval sloop. The captain wants to go after the merchantman, arguing the prize is worth the risk. But a significant portion of the crew is wary of the second ship. A council is called. The entire crew, all 80 of you, gathers on the main deck. The quartermaster presides, ensuring everyone gets a chance to speak. Men stand up, making their case with passionate gestures and loud voices. It's part town hall meeting, part barroom argument. You, a green hand who's been on board less than a week, have the same right to speak as the captain. And when the talking is done, you get a vote. A real vote. Historians still argue about how deep this egalitarianism truly ran, questioning whether charismatic captains could manipulate the vote, much like modern politicians with a gift for rhetoric. But as you raise your hand with a majority to avoid the risk and sail south, you feel a surge of power you have never known. The decision is made. The captain, despite arguing for the opposite, accepts the crew's will without complaint. That is the law. But this democracy has a sharp and brutal edge. You learn this when a man is accused of stealing silver buckles from his messmate's sea chest. There is no ambiguity in the articles about this. It is one of the gravest sins. A trial is held, with the quartermaster presenting the evidence and the entire crew acting as jury. The man is found guilty. The punishment is marooning. The ship sails to a tiny, god-forsaken island, a mere speck of sand and rock. The condemned man is put in a small boat with a single flask of water, a pistol, and one measure of gunpowder and shot. This is the quirky, grim tidbit of pirate justice. It's not just abandonment, it's a final, cruel choice left to the victim. He can wait for a slow death by thirst or exposure, or he can choose a quicker end. As you sail away, leaving the man a lonely figure shrinking against the horizon, you understand the flip side of this freedom. The crew is a brotherhood, bound by a sacred trust. Your vote gives you power, but the articles you signed are not suggestions. They are a covenant, and the price for breaking that covenant is absolute. You're part of a community, but it is a community that will cut off its own limbs to survive. The image of the marooned man, a shrinking silhouette against the vastness of the sea, haunts you for days. It serves as a stark reminder that the community you've joined is as unforgiving as it is liberating. With this unsettling knowledge settling into your bones, you begin to pay closer attention to the physical world around you, your new home, your fortress, your prison, the ship itself. And you quickly realise that the social contract of the pirates might be revolutionary, but their living conditions are anything but. The vessel is a cramped, filthy, floating slum, and there is no escape. Your first challenge is simply finding a place to exist. The ship, likely a captured sloop or a small frigate, was never designed to hold the 80 or more men that now call it home. Personal space is a fantasy. You sleep below decks in the forecastle, a dark, low-ceilinged space crammed with canvas hammocks strung so close together they knock into each other with every roll of the ship. There are no private cabins, no quiet corners. You're living, eating and sleeping in what amounts to a single chaotic room with 80 roommates, none of whom are particularly concerned with hygiene. The air is a thick, soupy mixture of sweat, stale rum and dampness, so heavy you feel you could chew it. The sounds are a constant symphony of humanity, snoring, coughing, groaning, and the occasional nightmare-fueled shout. It makes your previous life on the merchant vessel feel like a stay at a luxury resort. Then there's the smell. You thought you knew it on the merchant ship, but you were merely a visitor then. Now, it is the atmosphere you breathe. The foundational note is the inescapable dampness that seeps into the very wood of the ship, a scent of rot and mildew. Layered on top is the stomach-churning stench of the bilge, a deep, hidden reservoir of stagnant seawater, vomit, and any other filth that drains to the lowest point of the ship. Add to that the smells of unwashed men, the tar used to caulk the seams of the hull, and the faint but distinct odour of the livestock, chickens and sometimes a goat, kept in pens on the deck. Your world is an olfactory assault from which there is no relief. And you are not the only inhabitants. This is a mainstream historical fact of life at sea. You share your home with an army of vermin. Rats, grown bold and fat on stolen scraps, scurry along the beams above your head as you try to sleep. You feel them running over your hammock ropes in the dark. Cockroaches swarm in the galley, a moving carpet of black that disappears into the cracks when a lantern is brought near. They are a constant, unwelcome presence, a reminder that you're just another animal trying to survive in this wooden shell. Basic sanitation is almost non-existent. You learn the hard way about the ship's head. This isn't a room, but a small grating or a set of carved wooden seats located at the very bow, or head, of the ship. This quirky but entirely factual arrangement hangs out over the water, completely open to the elements. To relieve yourself, you must perch precariously over the churning sea, often with waves spraying up at you, with absolutely zero privacy. It's a humbling and frequently disgusting experience, especially in rough weather. It's no wonder so many sailors suffered from stomach ailments. Even when you're on deck, the environment is an unrelenting assault on your senses. The ship is never silent. It is a living thing, and it speaks a language of constant protest. The creak and groan of the timbers, the deep thrum of the masts under the strain of the wind, the sharp snap of the canvas sails, the rhythmic rush of water against the hull. It's a cacophony that becomes the soundtrack to your life. It's like having an upstairs neighbour who's constantly rearranging heavy furniture, day and night. The motion, too, is relentless. The gentle rocking that can lull you to sleep in a calm sea becomes a violent, nauseating bucking and rolling in a storm, throwing you across the deck if you're not careful. Naval historians and archaeologists still debate the exact layout of typical pirate sleeping quarters, as so few unmodified pirate vessels have ever been recovered. We have diagrams of naval and merchant ships, but pirates often modified their vessels, sometimes knocking down cabin walls to make more room for cannons and crew. Did everyone have a hammock? Did some men simply find a spot on a coil of rope or between cannons to sleep? The specifics are lost to time, but the reality was one of severe overcrowding. Amidst this chaos, you find a small patch to call your own. A small sea chest for your few belongings, a specific place in your hammock rotation. You learn to brace yourself against the roll of the ship without thinking. You learn to filter out the noise. This wretched, crowded, filthy vessel is your world now. It is your weapon, your shield, and your only defence against the vast, empty ocean. It's not much, but it's home. You're beginning to learn the language of your new home. Not the words the men speak, but the groans of the timber, The pitch of the wind in the rigging, the rhythm of the waves. You've accepted the filth and the crowding as a simple fact of life, like the rising of the sun. But with that acceptance comes a deeper understanding. This home is a complex and fragile machine, and the ocean is constantly trying to break it. You've traded the tyranny of a captain for the tyranny of the ship itself. The romantic tales of piracy, the stories of endless adventure and daring raids, conveniently leave out the sheer, mind-numbing boredom of the work required to keep you all from sinking. For every hour of thrilling action, there are 1,000 hours of tedious, back-breaking maintenance. Your day is not spent scanning the horizon for treasure ships. It is spent on your hands and knees. You scrub the deck, not just for the sake of tidiness, but because the salt water keeps the wooden planks from drying, shrinking, and cracking under the relentless sun. You learn to handle the ropes, coiling them with obsessive neatness so they can run free in an instant. An untidy rope can snag at a critical moment, costing you a prize, or worse, your life. You're constantly painting, or more accurately, tarring. Every piece of exposed wooden rope needs a coat of pine tar to protect it from the corrosive effects of salt and water. It's a sticky, smelly, endless job. It's less yo-ho-ho and more yet another coat. Then there is the mending. Your ship's sails are its engine, and they are perpetually in a state of disrepair. A strong gust of wind can tear a seam. A moment of chafe against a stay can wear a hole. So you spend countless hours sitting cross-legged on the deck, a large needle and a sailor's palm, a leather guard worn over your hand, forcing the needle through the stiff, heavy canvas. Stitch by stitch, you repair the damage. It is tedious, exacting work, a sewing project on a gargantuan scale with fabric as tough as leather. Your hands, already calloused from hauling ropes, become pricked and raw in new and interesting ways. The most vital and hated job of all is caulking. This is a mainstream historical fact of wooden ship maintenance. The hundreds of planks that make up the hull are always shifting and working against each other, opening up tiny gaps for seawater to invade. Your job is to fight a never-ending war against the ocean's slow, persistent ingress. You take old, frayed rope, tease it apart into fibres called oakum, and then, with a special mallet and chisel, you hammer these fibres deep into the seams between the planks. Once the seam is packed tight, you seal it over with a layer of hot, molten pitch or tar. It's a miserable task. You're often hanging over the side of the ship on a precarious plank seat. The foul-smelling tar drips onto you, and the repetitive thwack, thwack, thwack of the mallet rings in your ears for hours. Maritime historians debate whether the pirates' democratic principles extended to the division of daily chores, or if, like on most ships, the newest and least experienced hands were saddled with the worst jobs. You suspect it's a bit of both. While major decisions are voted on, nobody is voting on who gets the delightful task of hammering stinky rope fibres into a crack for 6 hours. That job seems to find its way to you. The new guy. Quite often. The biggest maintenance job of all is one that renders you completely helpless. Careening. Over time, the ship's hull below the waterline becomes a shaggy carpet of weeds and barnacles, slowing the vessel down. Worse, it becomes home to a quirky and destructive creature called the Teredo navalis, or the shipworm. It's not a worm at all, but a type of saltwater clam that bores through submerged wood, capable of destroying a ship's hull from the inside out. To fight this, the ship must be careened. You find a hidden, secluded bay and intentionally run the ship aground at high tide. As the tide goes out, the ship lists over onto its side, exposing one half of the hull. Then begins the disgusting, arduous work of scraping everything off with hand tools, a thick, slimy, stinking layer of marine life. You then burn the surface and retar it before waiting for the next high tide to float the ship, so you can repeat the process on the other side. For days, sometimes weeks, you're stranded, your ship disabled, a sitting duck for any authorities who might stumble upon your hiding place. It's the pirate equivalent of having your car up on blocks in the driveway. Except your driveway is a hostile beach and the neighbourhood watch is the Royal Navy. It is grueling, repetitive, and utterly unglamorous work. But here, you notice a fundamental difference. On the merchant ship, you work sullenly, doing the bare minimum required to avoid a flogging. Here, the men work with a grim purpose. You're not maintaining the ship for some wealthy owner in London or Boston. You're maintaining it for yourselves. Every patch sail makes you faster. Every sealed seam makes you safer. A clean hull means you can catch a fleeing merchantman or outrun a naval frigate. You are a shareholder in this enterprise, and this is your sweat equity. As the sun sets, your muscles ache and your hands are raw. But looking at the ship, your ship, you feel not the resentment of a servant, but the weary pride of a proprietor. The sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that you're too exhausted to appreciate. Your muscles are a symphony of aches from the day's relentless labour, a constant reminder of the physical price of this life. A call from the cook, a welcome sound no matter how grim the eventual meal, signals the end of the workday. You join your messmates, finding a spot on the deck to sit. The camaraderie is easy, the banter a brief respite from the toil, but your thoughts, and the thoughts of every man here, are on the food. The fuel that will be asked to somehow rebuild your spent energy for the dawn that is coming all too soon. Forget any images you have of pirates feasting around a groaning table. The reality of your daily diet is as monotonous and grim as the work itself. The cook hands you your portion, and you look down at the familiar sight in your wooden bowl. The centrepiece is a chunk of salt beef. This meat was butchered months, perhaps even years ago, and has been preserved in barrels of brine. It is a brick of protein, so saturated with salt that it's barely recognisable as meat. The colour is a sullen, purplish grey, and the texture is incredibly tough, like trying to chew through leather. You saw it being prepared, soaked for hours to draw out some of the salt, but it's never enough. Each bite is a jaw-aching ordeal that leaves a desiccating, salty film in your mouth. Some joke that it's the reason pirates are always thirsty. You think it's probably true. Alongside the meat is the true staple of your diet, the foundation of every meal at sea, hardtack, also known as ship's biscuit. It is, in essence, a simple flour and water cracker, baked until it has the density and durability of a fired brick. It's designed for longevity, not flavour or texture. To eat it, you must first break off a piece, a task which often requires smacking it against the edge of a cannon or using the handle of your knife. Biting into it directly is a good way to lose a tooth. The mainstream historical fact of hardtack, however, is not just its hardness, but its inhabitants. Stored for months in the ship's hold, the barrels become infested. When you look closely at your biscuit, you can see the small black heads of weevils and the pale, wriggling bodies of maggots. The common practice, you quickly learn, is to tap the biscuit firmly on the table before you take a bite. In the dim light of the evening, you can't see the critters, but you can hear them fall. It's a sort of don't ask, don't tell policy for your dinner. To wash this down, you have your daily ration of drink. The water stored in the ship's casks is often months old, slimy with algae and tasting foul. It's generally unsafe to drink. Alcohol is safer, but a crew of drunk sailors is a crew of useless sailors. So you drink grog. This quirky name has a history. While you aren't on a Royal Navy ship, the practice is the same. The term comes from a British admiral, Edward Vernon, who was nicknamed Old Grog because of the waterproof grogram cloak he wore. To stop his sailors from hoarding their daily rum ration and getting drunk all at once, he ordered that it be diluted with water. The resulting drink was mockingly named grog in his honour. Your ration is much the same, a measure of fiery, cheap rum cut with a few measures of water. It's not delicious, but it's wet, it's safe, and it provides a dull, warming buzz that takes the edge off your aching body. Food historians and maritime archaeologists debate whether pirates, with their ability to capture fresh supplies, ate significantly better than their naval or merchant counterparts. The truth, you're learning, is that it's a life of feast or famine. For weeks on end, you endure the salt meat and weevils. But then, after you capture a prize, everything changes. Suddenly, the deck is filled with crates of fresh vegetables, baskets of fruit, and live, squawking chickens. Those nights are festivals. You might go ashore on a sandy beach and have a boucan, a traditional Caribbean barbecue, roasting a captured goat or pig over an open fire. You gorge yourselves on fresh bread, real cheese, and drink fine wine from the captured captain's stores. These moments of gluttony are what you dream of during the long, lean weeks. The taste of a fresh orange becomes as powerful a motivator as a chest of gold. But for now, there is no feast. You finish your meagre meal, your jaw sore, your stomach full but not satisfied. The food sits heavy, a salty, dense mass. It is fuel, nothing more. There is no pleasure in it, only the cold calculus of survival. And as you scrape your bowl clean, you feel a deep, gnawing hunger not just for more food, but for real food. A hunger that makes the prospect of the next attack, the next chase, a little less terrifying and a little more appealing. After all, the next ship might have apples. That gnawing hunger for fresh food you feel is more than just a craving. It's a deep, instinctual fear. You're beginning to see what a diet of salt and biscuits does to a man over time. It's a slow decay, a hollowing out from the inside. Your greatest fear is not a Spanish cannonball or the hangman's rope. It's the quiet, creeping illnesses that flourish in the damp, deprived conditions of your new home. Chief among these is the phantom that haunts every sailor of this age, scurvy. You see its first signs in an older crewmate. He becomes sullen and exhausted, a deep lethargy that no amount of rum can shake. Then you notice his gums, swollen and purple, bleeding at the slightest touch. His teeth become loose in their sockets. He complains of a profound pain in his joints. The most terrifying part of this mainstream historical fact is its mystery. No one knows that scurvy is caused by a simple lack of what will one day be called vitamin C. To you and your crewmates, it seems like a curse, a type of creeping rot that the sea inflicts upon men who stay away from land for too long. You hear whispers that old, long-healed wounds can spontaneously reopen on a man afflicted with scurvy, his body literally starting to fall apart. You find yourself checking your own gums, pressing on your teeth, living with a new, quiet dread that has nothing to do with battle. Beyond the spectre of disease are the more immediate, physical dangers. Every single task you perform carries the risk of horrific injury. A slip from the icy rigging in a storm means a 100-foot fall onto a hard wooden deck. A snapped rope under tension can whip across the deck with enough force to break bones or take off a limb. A heavy cannon breaking its restraints in rough seas becomes an indiscriminate, 2-ton battering ram. These mundane accidents are far more common than wounds received in a glorious sword fight. And when injury occurs, you must face the ship's surgeon. Forget any notion of a learned, gentle physician. The ship surgeon is often not a doctor at all. In a quirky but practical twist of fate, the man designated as the surgeon might also be the ship's carpenter. The logic is simple and grim. Both jobs require a steady hand with a saw. The surgeon's value is not in his diagnostic skill, but in his speed. His medical chest is a box of horrors, bone saws of various sizes, crude knives, iron probes for exploring wounds, and his most important tool, a brazier for heating pitch or a cauterizing iron. Historians debate whether pirate crews, due to the compensation clause in their articles, placed a higher value on their surgeon than naval or merchant captains did. Some evidence suggests skilled surgeons were highly sought after, sometimes offered an extra share of plunder to persuade them to sign on. A man who could perform a clean amputation might save your life, ensuring you live to collect your injury compensation and retire. You see his work firsthand when a falling block crushes a fellow pirate's leg. The man is carried below, screaming. There is no anaesthetic, only a bottle of rum poured down his throat and a leather strap to bite down on to keep him from biting off his own tongue. The surgeon and his assistants hold the man down. The work must be fast. You hear the high-pitched, grating sound of the saw working its way through bone. It is a sound that will live in your nightmares forever. It is followed by the man's shriek as the surgeon takes a pitch-heated knife and presses it to the stump, or pours boiling tar over the wound. This brutal act of cauterization is meant to stop the bleeding and seal the wound against infection. It's a terrifying, desperate measure, like putting out a fire with a flamethrower, but it's the only medicine he has. You see the results of his work walking the deck every day. Men with empty sleeves, men who hobble on crudely carved wooden legs. They are living symbols of the price of this life. They received their share of silver as promised by the articles for their loss. But their careers as effective fighters are over. They're a constant, visible reminder of how quickly your life can change, how one moment of bad luck can leave you maimed and broken. You finish your day's work and unconsciously check yourself for bruises, for cuts. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling for any looseness. You look at your own two hands, your own two legs, and they feel fragile, temporary. You've learned that the surgeon's table is the dark heart of the ship, a place of butchery born from necessity. The fear of that table, of the saw and the hot tar, becomes a new and powerful instinct. It gives you a new respect for the weapons the men carry, for they are the tools designed to send a man to that very table. That deep, primal fear of the surgeon's saw changes how you see the world. It especially changes how you see the tools of your new trade. Before, the rows of cutlasses and pistols stored in the arms locker were just part of the ship's intimidating decor. Now, you look at them and see the other side of the equation. They are not just symbols of a pirate's freedom. They are the instruments designed to break bodies, to sever limbs, to send a man to that blood-soaked table below decks. One day, the quartermaster decides your training as a simple deckhand is over. He issues you your own weapons, and their weight in your hands feels like a heavy responsibility. First is the cutlass. It is not the elegant, slender rapier of a nobleman or a duelist. The pirate cutlass is a brutal, practical weapon. The blade is short, thick, and slightly curved, designed for powerful slashing and chopping motions in the tight, crowded confines of a ship's deck. It's less of a surgical instrument and more of a sharpened crowbar. The hilt is a simple cup or basket of steel. They are not for fancy parrying, but to protect your knuckles from being smashed in a chaotic melee. You practice with it, swinging its heavy weight, and realise it's a weapon of momentum and brute force. There is little finesse here. You're not learning to fence, you're learning to hack. Next, you're handed a brace of flintlock pistols. These, you learn, are the most misunderstood of all pirate weapons. The mainstream historical fact is that the flintlock pistol of the early 18th century was a deeply unreliable piece of technology. You're shown the laborious process of loading one. You pour a measure of black powder down the muzzle, drop in a lead ball, and ram it all down with a rod. Then you prime a separate pan with a finer powder. You pull the cock back, and when you pull the trigger, the flint strikes the steel frizzen, creating a spark that ignites the priming pan, which in turn ignites the main charge in the barrel. At least, that's the theory. In the damp sea air, the powder often gets wet and fails to ignite. Sometimes the flint fails to spark. It is a single-shot weapon that is painfully slow to reload, making it about as useful in a sustained fight as a modern appliance you have to assemble from a flat-pack box during an emergency. This is why you're given 2, or even 3. The strategy is to fire them once as you charge, drop the empty weapons, and then draw your steel. Military historians and weapons experts still debate the extent to which pirates favoured axes and boarding pikes over swords. As you look around at the veteran pirate, you see the argument in practice. Many prefer a simple boarding axe. On a deck cluttered with ropes, masts, and other men, a longsword is awkward, but a heavy axe requires no room and no grace, just a strong arm. It can smash through a wooden door or a human skull with equal terrifying efficiency. You also see long boarding pikes, simple spears designed to keep defenders at bay as you climb over the rails. The ship itself is also a weapon, but its purpose is different from what you might think. You learn about the ammunition for the cannons, and much of it isn't designed to punch holes in hulls. One quirky but common type of ammunition is chain shot. Instead of a single, solid cannonball, the gun is loaded with 2 smaller balls connected by a length of heavy chain. When fired, this contraption whirls through the air like a demonic bolus, scything through the air with incredible force. It won't sink a ship, but it will shred its sails to ribbons and snap its wooden masts and spars. The goal of a pirate attack is not to destroy the prize, but to disable it, to cripple it like a bird with a broken wing, making it helpless and easy to board. You want the cargo, and a ship at the bottom of the ocean pays no dividends. Your training is informal. An old hand shows you the basic blocks and slashes with a cutlass, mocking your clumsy movements. You practice reloading your pistol until your fingers are black with powder and you can do it in the dark, by feel alone. You learn that in a real fight, all the practice in the world gives way to chaos, noise, and fear. The weapons are there to give you an edge, but it is your nerve that will determine if you live or die. As night falls, you stand your first watch fully armed. A cutlass is heavy on your hip, its handle cool against your hand. The 2 pistols are tucked into a sash across your chest, their wooden grips a constant, weighty presence. The fear of the surgeon's table is still there, a cold knot in your stomach, but now it is mixed with something else. A grim sense of purpose. These are no longer just objects to you. They are your tools, your keys to survival. You're no longer just a sailor. You're an armed pirate, a predator, and you're expected to use these tools to hunt. The weight of the weapons on your belt is no longer just a comfort or a fear. It is a promise of violence that needs a target. And so your days take on a new kind of monotony, not of labour, but of waiting, of hunting. You spend long, tedious hours perched high above the deck in the crow's nest, a small wooden basket at the top of the mainmast. The ship is a tiny speck in a vast blue, empty world. The sun beats down on you, the wind is a constant whisper in your ears, and your eyes ache from scanning the horizon, searching for that one crucial thing, a smudge, a speck, a distant sail. It's the world's most boring and high-stakes game of I Spy. You learn that this hunt is not a matter of random chance. You're not simply wandering the ocean hoping to bump into another vessel. The old scarred pirate who shares your watch explains it to you, pointing at a crude map. You are positioned squarely on one of the great arteries of global commerce. Just more. This is a mainstream historical fact of piracy. They were ambush predators, and they knew where their prey lived. You're lurking along the trade route that carries sugar and tobacco from the Caribbean back to England. You're waiting for the herd to pass through your hunting ground. All you need is patience, and to pick a weak one from the back of the pack. From your perch, you learn the subtle art of identifying a ship from miles away. The captain spends time with you, teaching you to read the silhouettes. The number of masts, the arrangement of the sails, the shape of the hull, each detail tells a story. You learn to distinguish a swift naval sloop, a vessel to be avoided at all costs. From a wide-beamed, wallowing merchant flute, a ship built for cargo capacity, not for speed. The crew calls these merchant ships fat cows, and they are your favourite prey. You learn to judge how a ship sits in the water. One riding high and light is likely sailing from Europe, its hold full of cloth and manufactured goods of little use to you. But a ship sitting low, ploughing heavily through the waves, is the real prize. It is burdened with wealth, heading home with a belly full of sugar, rum, indigo, or, if you're truly lucky, silver. This careful calculation is the core of the pirate business model. You're not a warrior seeking a glorious battle, you're a pragmatist seeking profit. Before any chase begins, a debate rages on deck. The captain gauges the mood of the crew. Do we risk it? The distant ship looks large, which means more plunder, but it also has a row of painted gun ports. Are they real cannons, or just painted squares to fool attackers? It is a constant risk assessment. Historians and economists still debate whether pirates prefer to target massively wealthy but well-defended treasure ships, or if their business model relied more on the steady, less risky capture of ordinary merchant vessels carrying mundane but essential goods. The consensus on your ship seems to be that a steady diet of herring is better than starving while you wait for a single whale. Deception is your most important weapon. Your ship is currently flying the flag of the British Royal Navy. This quirky and common tactic is designed to quell any suspicion. As you draw nearer to a potential target, you will appear to be a friend, a protector. The Jolly Roger, your true colours, is kept bundled and hidden at the base of the mast. It will only be hoisted at the very last moment. The goal is not to engage in a long-range cannon duel, but to get so close, so unexpectedly, that the merchant crew's morale shatters before the first shot is even fired. You're relying on psychological warfare, not just firepower. After days of seeing nothing but empty water, it is you who spots it. A brig, sitting low in the water, its sails full and fat. It moves sluggishly. Through the spyglass, you can see it has no visible cannons, and its deck seems sparsely manned. It is perfect. Your shout from the crow's nest electrifies the ship. The lazy, waiting atmosphere vanishes, replaced by a quiet, buzzing energy. The captain confirms your sighting. A brief council is held, but the decision is a foregone conclusion. Everyone on board can smell the profit. The vote is a formality. A loud and unanimous aye. The ship comes alive. The course is changed. Men scramble up the rigging to trim the sails for maximum speed. The lazy waiting is over. The chase has begun. A silent tension descends upon the crew. Men check the priming on their pistols. They run a thumb along the edge of their cutlass. The quartermaster gives the order to clear the decks for action. The promise of your weapons is about to be fulfilled. As your ship cuts through the waves, closing the distance to your unsuspecting prey, you feel a jolt of adrenaline, a mixture of cold fear and hot anticipation. The boredom is over. Now, the terror begins. The gap between your ship and the merchantman slowly closes. You're so near now that you can see the expressions on the faces of the other crew. They look curious, perhaps a little wary, but not yet alarmed. Your false British flag flaps innocently in the breeze. You grip the rail, your knuckles white, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. The air is thick with a silence that feels heavier than any sound. The pirate captain catches the quartermaster's eye and gives a single sharp nod. The trap is about to be sprung. In a swift, practice motion, the British flag is hauled down. For a heartbeat, your mast is bare. Then, a new flag is run up, unfurling in the wind. It is stark black, bearing the simple, terrifying emblem of a human skull above two crossed bones. The Jolly Roger. This mainstream historical fact is the pivot upon which the entire encounter turns. It is a declaration, a symbol that says, "We are who you feared we were. Surrender now, and you may live. Resist, and you will receive no quarter." The change on the merchant ship's deck is instantaneous. Curiosity turns to wide-eyed panic. Men start shouting, running in confusion. They are completely unprepared. Before they can organise any defence, the second wave of the assault begins, the psychological attack. At another signal, your crew erupts. It is a calculated explosion of noise and fury. Every man begins to scream, a ragged, guttural roar from 80 throats. They bang their cutlasses and axes against the wooden rails, creating a deafening, percussive clangour. It's like the world's most terrifying surprise party, and you are the unwelcome guests of honour. You see, some of the veteran pirates have enacted a quirky and terrifying tradition. They have lit the slow-burning fuses they had tucked into their hats. The fuses sputter and hiss, wreathing their faces in clouds of acrid smoke, their eyes glinting from within the haze. They are deliberately making themselves into demonic apparitions, a tactic of showing a savage countenance designed to shatter the enemy's will to fight. Then comes the physical violence. The captain gives the order to fire. Your ship's cannons, which were hidden behind closed gun ports, unleash a single, coordinated broadside. You're not aiming for the hull. The air is filled with the ungodly shriek of chainshot as it rips through the merchantman's rigging, shredding sails and snapping spars. In the same instant, the men lining the rails armed with blunderbusses fire a volley across the gap. The deck of the other ship is swept with a hail of scrap iron, nails, and lead balls. The noise is a physical blow, a concussive boom that leaves your ears ringing. Grappling hooks arc through the air, their iron claws biting deep into the wood of the other ship. With shouts and grunts, your crew hauls on the ropes, pulling the two vessels together until they grind against each other with a sickening crunch. The order is given. Board her. You take a breath, say a prayer to a god you're not sure you believe in anymore, and you scramble over the rail with the rest of the boarding party. You land on the enemy deck in a chaotic, screaming wave of men. The reality of combat is nothing like the stories. It is not an elegant dance of blades. It is a clumsy, frantic, and brutally short affair. The air is so thick with gunpowder smoke that you can barely see. You fire your pistol in the direction of a terrified face, drop the useless weapon, and draw your cutlass. You swing it wildly, driven by pure adrenaline and the instinct to stay alive, but you find you have few targets. As historians who study maritime records still debate, the truth is that most pirate attacks were not pitched battles. The pirates' reputation, combined with the terrifying shock and awe of their assault, did the heavy lifting. Faced with a deck full of screaming, smoke-wreathed madmen, most of the merchant crew do the sensible thing. They drop their weapons and beg for their lives. The fight is over in less than a minute. The ship is yours. The quartermaster and his party move efficiently to round up the prisoners, kicking away their weapons and herding them into a terrified group. The merchant captain, pale and trembling, formally surrenders his vessel. A quiet falls over the deck, broken only by the groans of the few men who are wounded, and the crackle of a small fire in the tattered remains of a sail. The ringing in your ears slowly subsides. The metallic taste of fear and gunpowder is in your mouth. You look down at your hands, at the cutlass you still grip tightly, and realise you are unharmed. You have survived. You're standing on the deck of your prize, a victor. The wild terror of the attack begins to recede, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and the first sweet taste of triumph. The adrenaline from the attack drains away, leaving behind a shaky, ringing silence in your ears. The immediate, violent part of your work is done. Now, The business begins. You look at the captured merchant crew, huddled together and guarded. Their faces a mixture of terror and resignation. The pirate captain, who was a whirlwind of decisive fury just moments ago, now seems to relax, stepping back from the centre of the action. He's delivered the prize. His job, for the moment, is over. A new authority now takes command. The quartermaster steps forward, his demeanour all business, and the chaotic aftermath of battle transforms into a surprisingly orderly process. He's less like a victorious warrior and more like an auditor who has arrived to take inventory after a corporate takeover. This transition of power is the key to everything. The common phrase, "no honour among thieves," is a lie, at least here. You're about to witness the system that prevents this floating republic from devouring itself. First comes the personal plunder. This is a quirky, immediate, and often humiliating ritual for the victims. Your crewmates descend upon the captured sailors and any passengers, stripping them of their personal effects. Fine coats, sturdy boots, silver buckles, rings, and any coins in their pockets are taken. It's an instant bonus for the boarding party, a chaotic free-for-all that is tolerated before the real accounting begins. You watch a wealthy merchant who moments ago was puffed with authority shiver in his undergarments after being stripped of his finery. Once this initial frenzy is over, the quartermaster restores order with a sharp command. No one touches the cargo. That is common plunder, and it belongs to everyone. He directs a party, including you, to go below and assess the hold. You climb down into the dark, musty belly of the ship, your lantern casting dancing shadows, and you see it, not chests overflowing with gold, but something far more practical. Barrels are stacked high, and a veteran pirate cracks one open. It's full of dark, pungent molasses, a key component for making rum. Another contains high-grade tobacco. There are crates of indigo dye, bolts of fine silk, and casks of Spanish wine. Every valuable item is methodically hauled onto the deck of your own ship and laid out for all to see. This is a crucial part of the process, a mainstream historical fact of pirate governance. Everything is done in the open to ensure transparency and prevent anyone from hiding a portion of the treasure for themselves. The penalty for being caught doing so is one of the worst imaginable, being marooned or executed. Your share is guaranteed, but the system only works if everyone trusts it. The quartermaster and his assistants act as appraisers, like hosts of some high-stakes antique roadshow. They estimate the value of each item, creating a detailed inventory. Then comes the division, all dictated by the articles you signed. As a new but able-bodied pirate, you're entitled to one full share. The captain, for his leadership in battle, will receive 2 shares. The quartermaster, for his administrative duties and for acting as the crew's representative, gets a share and a half. The same goes for the surgeon and other key specialists like the master gunner and carpenter. Economic historians continue to analyse pirate articles, debating the subtle variations in share distribution. Was the captain's double share a fair reflection of his immense responsibility, or an early sign of the same inequality you sought to escape, slowly creeping back into this self-proclaimed democracy? The quartermaster begins to call out names. Each man steps forward to claim to his portion. He might be given a small pouch of coins taken from the merchant captain's strongbox, a fine pistol, or a bolt of valuable cloth. For the large cargo items like the sugar and tobacco, which will be sold later in a friendly port, you're given what amounts to a promissory note, a guarantee of your portion of the future profits. Then, your name is called. You step forward, your heart thumping. The quartermaster looks you in the eye, nods, and hands you your share. It's a small, heavy leather bag. Inside are silver coins, more money than you ever earned in a year on the miserable merchant vessel. He also hands you a new shirt and a sturdy pair of boots taken from the prize. You walk back to your spot on the deck, the weight of the coins in your hand, a deeply satisfying feeling of that. This is real. It is the tangible result of your risk, your fear, your labour. This is the pirate's wage. You look around at your fellow crewmates, each man inspecting his new wealth, a quiet contentment settling over the ship. The code has been honoured. The system worked. You have received your due, fairly and openly. And as you stow your first real treasure in your sea chest, you realise that the foundation of this brutal, violent world is not chaos, but a surprisingly rigid and predictable sense of justice. You sit with your small hoard of coins and your new gear, feeling a sense of wealth you've never known. But as you look around the deck, you notice something curious. While everyone is pleased with the silver, the veteran pirates seem far more excited about the less glamorous portions of the loot. Two men are gleefully inspecting a massive coil of new rope. The cook is stroking a barrel of flour as if it were a beloved pet. The captain himself is most interested in a set of navigational charts taken from the other vessel. You begin to realise that your understanding of treasure has been shaped by stories, not by reality. The true wealth of a pirate is not what glitters. The stories all focus on gold doubloons, silver pieces of 8, and sparkling jewels. And while you would certainly never turn those down, they're exceptionally rare. The day-to-day reality of piracy is built on a foundation of the mundane, the practical, and the perishable. The most valuable loot is often the most boring. The first and most celebrated prize from any captured ship is its food. After weeks or months of subsisting on weevil-infested hardtack and salty stringy beef, the sight of barrels of flour, sacks of potatoes, or crates of onions can bring a tear to a pirate's eye. When you captured that merchantman, the loudest cheer wasn't for the strongbox, but for the discovery of a small pen of live chickens on its deck. That night you feast on fresh roasted fowl, and the taste is more valuable than any silver coin. Wine, beer, and casks of brandy are also cause for celebration, a welcome relief from the monotonous daily ration of watered-down rum. Just as important as food are the naval stores. This is a mainstream historical fact that is often overlooked in the swashbuckling tales. Your ship is in a constant state of decay, a battle against the entropy of the sea. Therefore, the most practical and useful things you can steal are the very things you need to keep your ship afloat and effective. Coils of rope, bolts of thick canvas for mending or making sails, barrels of tar and pitch for sealing the hull, spare anchors, and timber for repairs. These items are worth their weight in gold because they guarantee your continued survival and ability to hunt. Finding a hold full of naval stores is like a modern-day office suddenly receiving a lifetime supply of printer ink and paper. It's not exciting, but it's profoundly necessary. It is the lifeblood of your operation. Of course, weapons and ammunition are always a prime commodity. You can never have too much gunpowder, and a pirate ship's supply is constantly at risk of being ruined by dampness. Kegs of dry powder, bars of lead to be melted down into musket balls, and crates of new flintlocks or cutlasses are always welcome. Sometimes, you even capture cannons that are superior to your own, and the ship's carpenter will oversee the massive task of mounting the new guns on your decks to increase your firepower. One of the quirkiest and most sought-after prizes is a good medicine chest. If a captured ship had a surgeon on board, his supplies are plundered with an almost religious reverence. In a world without antibiotics, where infection is a death sentence and diseases like malaria and syphilis are rampant, medicines are miracle cures. A jar of cinchona bark, which contains quinine, is a priceless weapon against fever. A container of mercury, the grim treatment for venereal disease, could save a man's life, however unpleasant the process. Finding these supplies is like raiding a floating pharmacy, and the relief it brings to a crew plagued by sickness is immeasurable. The role of pirates in the transatlantic slave trade is a complex and highly debated topic among historians. You hear the arguments among your own crew. Some see a slave ship as just another vessel, its human cargo a commodity to be captured and sold in the nearest corrupt port. Others, many of whom are escaped slaves themselves, argue for liberating the captives, viewing it as a moral duty. They see potential new recruits in the hold, men who would eagerly join a pirate crew for a chance at freedom and revenge. The decision of what to do with such a prize is one of the few that can truly divide a crew along moral, rather than purely practical, lines. So you learn to see a prize ship not as a treasure chest, but as a floating warehouse. The silks, spices, sugar, and tobacco are your inventory, the goods you will sell for cash. But the rope, the canvas, the flour, and the medicine, that is your operating budget and your health insurance. You're not just a buccaneer, you're a ruthless supply chain manager. Your wealth is not the silver in your pocket, but the integrity of your ship's hull and the health of your crew. The gold is just the flashy bonus at the end. The real treasure is the ability to sail another day, to fight another battle, and to live to see the next prize. Your newfound understanding of practical wealth, of rope, canvas, and flour is all well and good for survival at sea, but you still have a pocket full of silver coins that are useless on a ship. For weeks, that small bag of money has represented a future promise, a hypothetical good time. Now, that promise is about to be fulfilled. The lookout shouts the name of a friendly island, a notorious pirate haven. For you, it is your first time visiting a place like Nassau on the island of New Providence, a mainstream historical fact that served as the heart of the pirate republic. This is not a civilized colonial port under the thumb of a royal governor. This is a pirate town, run by pirates, for pirates. As you sail into the bay, you see it is crowded with other ships just like yours. Their crews a mix of intimidating and welcoming figures. The Law of Nations ends here. The Law of the Articles begins. The moment you step ashore, your senses are overwhelmed. After months of smelling nothing but salt, tar, and bilge water, the air here is thick with the smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, cheap perfume, and spilled rum. After hearing only the creak of your ship and the whistle of the wind, the noise is a deafening cacophony of drunken singing, shouting, off-key music from a dozen taverns, and the general roar of a town with no authorities and no rules. It's a chaotic, ramshackle place, a lawless tropical version of Las Vegas, built of driftwood and ambition. Before the real fun can begin, business must be conducted. The quartermaster takes the bulk cargo you captured, the barrels of sugar, tobacco, and indigo, and sells it to the local merchants. You watch the transaction and notice a quirky but universal truth about these pirate havens. The merchants who operate here are masters of exploitation. They buy your stolen goods for a fraction of their real value, knowing you have nowhere else to sell them. Then they turn around and sell you the supplies you need: gunpowder, fresh water, food, at hugely inflated prices. They are fleecing you on both ends, and they know you have no choice. The house, it seems, always wins, even in a lawless paradise. But soon enough, the deals are done, and your pockets are heavy with your share of the silver. The entire crew is unleashed upon the town, and they explode out of the starting gate like racehorses. The first stop for nearly everyone is a tavern. You walk into a large, smoke-filled room, and the scene is one of pure bedlam. Men are singing, dancing on tables, and pouring rum down their throats as if determined to drink the entire island dry. The strict rule against gambling on the ship is gleefully forgotten here. Dice games and card tables are everywhere, with piles of silver changing hands on a single throw or the turn of a card. You watch one of your shipmates, a man who received the same share as you, lose his entire fortune in less than an hour, only to shrug, laugh, and borrow money for another drink. Sociologists and historians debate whether the pirates' tendency to spend their money so lavishly and quickly was a form of self-destructive behaviour driven by the constant threat of death, or a rational economic choice. In a world where there are no banks to protect your money, no way to invest, and no real chance of a peaceful retirement, perhaps spending it all on a week of glorious memory-making debauchery is the most logical thing a man can do. You can't take it with you, after all, and your short life might end next week. You indulge yourself. You eat fresh-cooked food until you're sick. You buy a new, brightly coloured coat you don't need. You drink better rum than you've ever tasted. The silver flows through your fingers like water. For a few days you live like a king with no thought for tomorrow. It is glorious and dizzying and utterly unsustainable. The merry life is intoxicating. Then, inevitably, the party ends. The money runs out. The town that seemed so welcoming and full of opportunity now feels predatory and expensive. Your crew is a collection of bruised, hungover, and utterly broke men. While you were all living like kings, the captain and quartermaster were wisely using their larger shares, and a portion of the common fund to properly repair and resupply the ship. And now it is ready to sail. The call goes out. It's time to go back to work. Back. On the account. And you're ready. The shore was a wonderful, chaotic dream. But the ship is your reality. It is your home and your only source of income. You and the rest of the crew, sobered and penniless, readily line up to sign the ship's articles once again, pledging yourselves to another voyage. The cycle is complete. You leave the pirate haven in your wake, a place of joyous, temporary madness, and head back to the vast, lonely silence of the sea, ready to do it all over again. Your ship is once again a self-contained world, slicing through the empty ocean. The wild, chaotic shore leave is already a hazy, half-remembered dream. You look at your crewmates as they go about their endless chores. They are back in their familiar, tar-stained work clothes, their faces weathered by sun and wind. And it occurs to you that the pirates of legend, the ones from the stories that are whispered back on land, look nothing at all like the real men you live and work with every single day. The popular image of a pirate is a wonderful and enduring fiction, a theatrical costume that has almost nothing to do with the brutal, practical reality. Let's start with the clothes. The mainstream historical fact is that pirates dressed for work, not for a play. You look down at your own attire. You wear a pair of loose-fitting canvas trousers, durable and easy to move in. Your shirt is made of simple linen, collarless, and already stained from your work. On your head, you might wear a simple knitted wool cap, called a Monmouth cap, to keep you warm, or just a piece of cloth tied around your head to keep the sweat and hair out of your eyes. This is the pirate uniform. It is the same functional, unglamorous clothing worn by every common sailor of the era, chosen for its durability and low cost, not for its dramatic flair. The flamboyant long coats and plumed tricorn hats were for stolen nobility, and a pirate captain might keep one to wear when trying to impersonate a legitimate officer. But to wear such a thing while climbing the rigging would be absurd. It would be like a modern construction worker showing up to a job site in a tuxedo. And what of the classic accessories? The eye patch, for instance. You've seen men who are missing an eye. It's a common enough injury from splinters in a battle or a tavern brawl, but they don't wear patches. The quirky and popular theory is that a patch was used to keep one eye perpetually adapted to the dark, so a sailor could go from the bright sun on deck to the darkness below and see instantly by simply switching the patch. It's a clever idea, and it works, but there is no direct historical evidence that pirates in the Golden Age actually did this. It remains a fascinating but unproven bit of modern speculation. The same goes for the peg leg and the hook hand. Yes, amputation was a grim reality, as you know from your fear of the surgeon's table. but a man with a wooden leg or a hook for a hand was at a severe disadvantage. He couldn't climb the rigging, balance on a rolling deck, or handle ropes effectively. While the pirate code guaranteed him a share of compensation for his injury, his days as an effective pirate were largely over. He might be kept on as a cook or given some other menial task, but he was a figure of pity, not a fearsome archetype. He was a reminder of the terrible risks, not a symbol of pirate strength. Then there is the parrot. You have never, not once, seen a pirate with a parrot on his shoulder. You can't imagine anything more impractical. The ship is a chaotic, violent, and filthy place. A delicate tropical bird would be a constant nuisance, squawking, making a mess, and likely to be injured or killed during the first storm or battle. The idea comes almost entirely from one book, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, and its unforgettable character, Long John Silver, and his companion, Captain Flint. It's a wonderful piece of literary invention, but it has no basis in reality. Bringing a parrot into your workplace would be a terrible idea, especially when your workplace is a floating engine of war. Even the most fearsome pirate captain in history, Blackbeard, is a figure shrouded in myth. Historians and biographers still debate the extent of his theatricality. Was his famous appearance, with lit fuses woven into his massive black beard and hair, a regular part of his persona? Almost certainly not. It was a terrifying piece of psychological warfare. A costume he put on for battle to make himself appear to be a demon wreathed in smoke and fire. It was designed to make his enemies surrender without a fight. On a regular Tuesday, he likely looked like any other scruffy ship captain. And the ultimate myth, the treasure map with an X marking the spot, is almost entirely fiction. Pirates had no incentive to bury their treasure. Their motto was a short life and a merry one, which meant spending their plunder as quickly as possible in places like the one you just left. Burying a collective fortune would require a level of trust no crew possessed. Why let one man hide everyone's money? The rare documented cases of buried treasure, like that of Captain Kidd, were usually the result of a pirate trying to create a legal defence fund before his capture. It was an act of desperation, not a common practice. You look around the deck at the real pirates. They are not characters. They are dirty, tired, and hardened men. Their power doesn't come from a costume. It comes from their desperation, their shared code, and the terrifying black flag that now lies folded, waiting for its next appearance. The reality is far less romantic than the stories, and because of that, far more genuinely frightening. Now that your eyes have been stripped of the myths of pirate fashion, you begin to see your crewmates more clearly. You see them not as a uniform group of characters, but as a collection of individuals, each with a past they don't speak of. You start to listen more closely during the quiet night watches or the lazy afternoons. You hear a multitude of accents. The man mending a sail next to you speaks English with a thick Irish brogue. The master gunner curses in Dutch when he stubs his toe. Your messmate, with whom you share your daily grog, sometimes whispers in French in his sleep. Your ship is a floating mishmash of European seafaring nations, a small, armed, and deeply cynical version of the United Nations. But the diversity goes much deeper than that. You work, eat, and fight alongside men whose skin is black. This is a profound and mainstream historical fact that the romantic stories often ignore. On your ship, these men are not slaves. They are not servants. They are pirates. They are your equals. They carry weapons. They cast a vote in the ship's councils. And when a prize is taken, they receive a full share of the plunder just like you do. For many of them, who are likely escaped slaves from the brutal sugar plantations of the Caribbean, this ship is the only place in the world where they can experience true liberty. Some historians estimate that on many pirate vessels during the Golden Age, as much as a quarter of the crew is of African descent. This ship is one of the most progressive and integrated societies on Earth, a fact made all the more shocking by the brutal violence that underpins it. The crew is a magnet for all the world's outcasts. You meet men who were once soldiers, forced to desert their armies. You meet fishermen who lost their boats to debt, and you meet men who aren't sailors at all. Some of the older hands refer to themselves as buccaneers, and you learn the quirky origin of the term. It comes from the French word boucan, a wooden frame used for smoking meat. The original buccaneers were rough, lawless hunters of wild boar and cattle on the islands of Hispaniola and Tortuga. When the Spanish tried to drive them out, these expert woodsmen and marksmen took to the sea, bringing their rugged independence and frontier justice with them. They became the first generation of pirates, proving that you didn't need to be a sailor to declare war on the world. Given this strange mix of men, you begin to wonder about women. The ship's articles you signed are very clear on this point. No women are to be allowed on board. The conventional wisdom is that their presence would lead to jealousy and fighting, threatening the delicate social balance of the crew. For the most part, this rule holds true. But you hear whispers, stories of exceptions so remarkable they have become legends. The historical evidence for female pirates is scant, leading to a vigorous debate among scholars. Some argue that famous figures like Bonny and Mary Read were exceptionally rare anomalies, while others suggest that more women may have hidden their gender to survive on these male-dominated vessels. The story you hear, the one told in hushed tones, is of Calico Jack Rackham's crew. On his ship served a fierce, hot-tempered pirate named Bonny. Also on that crew was a quiet but deadly young man named Mark Red. The story goes that Anne took a liking to Mark, and in trying to seduce him, discovered that Mark was actually Mary Read, who had been disguised as a man her entire life to survive. They became close confidants, their secret safe until it was revealed to the whole crew. They were accepted, not because of their gender, but because they had proven themselves to be as tough, as skilled, and as ruthless as any man on board. It's a story that sounds like a wild fantasy, but it's one of the few documented cases we have. You look at the faces of your crew, a tapestry of origins and histories. Black men, white men, Europeans from a dozen nations, maybe even a Native American who joined a crew after his own land was taken. You are all runaways, renegades, and castaways. On land, you would be divided by race, by nationality, by class. You would be master and slave, rich and poor, enemy and ally. But here, on this floating plank of wood, these distinctions have been burned away. You are simply crew. Your shared status as outlaws, as men beyond the reach of any king or country, has forged you into a new kind of nation. A brotherhood bound not by blood or soil, but by a common enemy and a shared love of freedom. This strange, diverse brotherhood you have joined, this floating nation of outcasts, is bound together by a shared rejection of the world you left behind. And like any nation, it needs a flag, a symbol of its identity. A banner that declares its principles to all who see it. Your nation's flag is black as pitch, and it goes by a name that whispers of both cheer and menace, the Jolly Roger. You've seen it hoisted, and you've felt the raw power it contains. It is not merely a piece of cloth, it is a weapon, a contract, and a declaration of war against the entire world. Its primary purpose, you have learned, is psychological. It is a tool designed to make battles unnecessary. When your ship flies the flag of a nation, you are merely one vessel among many. But when the black flag goes up, you become an unambiguous threat, a vessel sailing under the authority of death itself. The message is simple and universally understood. Surrender now, and we may show you mercy. Resist, and we will show you none. Its power lies in this clarity. It is a brand identity instantly recognised on the high seas, and its brand promise is terror. The very name Jolly Roger is a quirky mystery, its origins debated by linguists. One compelling theory is that it's a corruption of the French phrase joli rouge, which means pretty red. This refers to the plain crimson flags flown by early French privateers and buccaneers. A red flag had a single, terrifying meaning. No quarter would be given. All who resisted would be put to the sword. The later black flag offered a grim choice, a chance for surrender. The Jolly Rouge offered none. It was a promise of pure slaughter. A mainstream historical fact that is often lost in modern tales is that there was no single, universal Jolly Roger. The famous skull with 2 crossed thigh bones is the most iconic version, but it was far from the only one. Just as nations have different flags, pirate captains had their own personal banners, their own terrifying logos to distinguish themselves on the open ocean. Your captain has his own design, but you hear stories of the more famous ones. Calico Jack Rackham, the captain who had Anne Bonny and Mary Red in his crew, used a skull above 2 crossed cutlasses, symbolising his crew's readiness to fight. The wildly successful Bartholomew Blackbeard Roberts had several flags, including one that was a grotesque personal boast. It showed him standing on 2 skulls, one labelled ABH, a Barbadian's head, and the other AMH, a Martinican's head, signifying his vengeance against the governors of those islands who had dared to cross him. The symbols on these flags were a simple, brutal visual language. A skull, of course, meant death. An hourglass, often held by a skeleton, told the victim that their time to decide was running out. A bleeding heart pierced by a spear was a promise of a slow and painful end. These were not abstract designs, they were short, grim stories, promising a terrible fate for any who chose to defy them. Flag historians, known as vexillologists, continue to debate whether the primary function of these flags was to foster a sense of identity and solidarity within the crew, or if their role as a tool of psychological warfare aimed at their victims was their most important purpose. Looking at the faces of your crewmates when your own flag is raised, you suspect the answer is both. It terrifies your enemies, but it unites you. On your ship, the flag is treated with a kind of reverence. It is not flown casually. It is kept carefully folded and hidden, its existence a secret until the final moments before an attack. Its power is in its shock value. The quartermaster himself is responsible for its keeping, and when he brings it out on deck, a hush falls over the crew. This piece of black cloth is the soul of your ship. It is the physical representation of the articles you all signed, the covenant that binds you together. When you first joined this crew, you saw the flag as a symbol of villainy, but now it means something different to you. It is the flag of your strange and brutal country. It represents every man on this vessel. The Englishman, the Frenchman, the former slave from Africa, all now citizens of this floating fortress. It is the one thing that erases your past and gives you a single, unified identity. The flag tells the world who you are. The much harder task, your learning, is figuring out where you are. The black flag tells you who you are, a citizen of a renegade nation. But it cannot tell you where you are. As you stand your watch, with the ocean stretching to every horizon, a deep and unsettling thought takes root in your mind. This world is immense, empty, and featureless. How do you find your way? How do you find a tiny island in a sea of thousands of square miles? How do you avoid the coast of your enemies? You begin to watch the ship's navigator, a quiet, intense man who is treated with a respect that borders on reverence. He is the keeper of the ship's greatest secret, its location. His tools are strange and arcane. worn paper charts, a brass compass, and a wooden instrument of arcs and angles called a quadrant. He is, you realise, a kind of sorcerer. You learn that finding your way at sea is a tale of two problems. The first, finding your latitude. Your position north or south of the equator is the easy part. Every day at noon, the navigator comes on deck and uses his quadrant or crossstaff to measure the angle of the sun at its highest point in the sky. By comparing this angle to the data in his almanac, he can calculate, and with reasonable accuracy, how far north or south you are. At night in the northern hemisphere, it's even simpler. The height of the North Star above the horizon corresponds directly to your latitude. It's a predictable, reliable piece of cosmic clockwork. But the second problem, finding your longitude, your position east or west, is a nightmare. This was the single greatest scientific challenge of your era, a puzzle that stumped the greatest minds in the world. To know your longitude, you need to know the time. The Earth spins at a steady rate of 15 degrees per hour. So, if you know the local time on your ship, which you can find from the sun's position, and you simultaneously know the time at a fixed starting point, like London or Paris, the difference between those two times will tell you your east-west position. The problem is that no one has a clock that can keep accurate time at sea. The pendulum clocks used on land are rendered useless by the constant rolling and pitching of a ship. The solution, an incredibly precise timepiece called a marine chronometer, is only just being invented and is fantastically expensive, a treasure far beyond the reach of a pirate crew. So, how does your navigator solve this impossible problem? He doesn't. He guesses. The main technique for estimating longitude is a quirky and notoriously inaccurate process called dead reckoning. It is, at best, an educated guess. The process begins with estimating your speed. A sailor heaves a small weighted piece of wood called a chip log into the water from the stern. The log is attached to a long rope with knots tied in it at precise intervals. Another sailor uses a small sand glass to time how many knots of the rope play out in, say, 30 seconds. This gives you a rough speed in knots, a term still used today. The navigator then takes this estimated speed, combines it with the direction from the ship's compass, and makes a little mark on his chart showing where he thinks you are. It's like trying to navigate a city by asking your passenger to stick their hand out the window to guess your speed, while you use a toy compass for direction. Maritime historians debate how skilled the average pirate navigator truly was. Were they often just stolen merchant marine officers, prize prisoners forced into service for their rare and valuable knowledge? Or did practical, intelligent pirates, men like your own navigator, learn the dark arts of celestial navigation themselves out of sheer, desperate necessity? Either way, the lives of the entire 80-man crew rest in the hands of this one man and his inspired guesswork. A small error in his calculations, compounded over weeks, can have disastrous consequences. It could mean missing your rendezvous with another pirate ship. It could mean failing to find the island where you plan to get fresh water, condemning you all to a slow death from thirst. It could mean running aground on an uncharted reef in the dead of night, tearing the bottom of your ship out and sinking you without a trace. The fear of being lost is a quiet, constant companion to the fear of battle. You watch the navigator now, his face pinched in concentration as he works his figures. You understand that your ship is not just held afloat by wood and tar, but suspended between the sea and the sky by a fragile, invisible thread of mathematics, observation, and intuition. You're a tiny, insignificant speck in an endless wilderness, and your only guide is a man making the best guess he can. This profound sense of vulnerability makes the sight of another sail on the horizon an event that stops your heart. It could be a prize, or it could be something far, far worse. That fragile sense of security you feel, suspended on the ocean by the navigator's skill, is about to be shattered. A cry comes from the crow's nest, the same cry that has previously signalled a prize and a payday. But the tone is different this time. It's not a shout of excitement, it's a shriek of alarm. You follow the lookout's pointing finger to the horizon and see a ship, but it is not a slow, heavy merchantman. This vessel is lean and fast, and it bristles with guns. Your captain, his face grim, confirms your worst fears through his spyglass. It is a Royal Navy frigate, a wolf of the sea, and it is turning towards you. For the first time, you are not the hunter. You are the hunted. The order is given not to fight, but to run. Your ship, a nimble sloop, is designed for speed, but the naval frigate is a dedicated warship, built to be the fastest and most powerful vessel of its class. As you frantically trim the sails, a new kind of fear settles in your gut. It's the fear of being outmatched by a superior foe, one with more guns, a larger crew, and the full backing of a government. An older pirate, his face as grim as the captain's, explains the new reality to you. The nations of Europe, having recently ended their long and costly war of the Spanish Succession, are finally turning their full attention to the problem of piracy. For years, they were too busy fighting each other to properly police their own trade routes, allowing piracy to flourish. This mainstream historical fact meant that thousands of trained sailors and privateers were suddenly unemployed when the war ended, flooding the seas with a ready supply of recruits for the pirate life. Now, the party's over. The great empires have unleashed their navies with a single, unified purpose: to eradicate you. You learn to fear the names of the men who command these ships. Not just naval officers, but men like Woodes Rogers. This quirky historical figure is a legend, a former privateer who successfully circumnavigated the globe. He knew the pirates' world inside and out. Appointed as the new governor of the Bahamas, he arrived in Nassau not just with warships, but with an offer and a threat. His official motto was Expulsis Piratis, Restituta Commercia, pirates expelled, commerce restored. He offered a king's pardon, a one-time amnesty for any pirate who would surrender their arms and renounce their criminal ways. It was a tempting offer for some, a chance to escape the noose. But for those who refused the pardon, Rogers was a relentless and brilliant hunter. He was the ultimate gamekeeper turned poacher, or in this case, poacher turned gamekeeper. This dual strategy of pardon and punishment was devastatingly effective. It sowed dissent among the pirate crews. Could you trust the man next to you not to take the pardon and testify against you? The pirate havens that were once safe suddenly became traps. Historians debate whether it was the might of the Royal Navy or the more subtle strategy of offering pardons and turning former pirates into pirate hunters that was ultimately more effective in dismantling the pirate republics. For you, fleeing a frigate on the open sea, the distinction is academic. Both are closing the net around you. The chase is a multi-hour agony. The frigate is relentless, slowly gaining on you. The wind is in its favour. You can hear the distant pop of its bow chaser cannons, the cannonballs splashing into the water behind you, getting closer each time. Your captain is a master sailor, pushing your small ship to its absolute limits, but it is not enough. The frigate is a greyhound, and you are the rabbit. There is no escape. Just as you are beginning to resign yourself to a fight you cannot win, your luck turns. The sky darkens with a sudden squall, the heavens open up, and a curtain of thick, blinding rain sweeps across the sea, hiding you from your pursuer. Your captain uses the chaos of the storm to change direction, and when the sun breaks through an hour later, the horizon behind you is empty. A ragged cheer goes up from your crew. You have escaped, but the relief is temporary. It is replaced by a cold, lingering paranoia. The sea is no longer your private wilderness. It is now patrolled by a dedicated and well-funded task force whose only job is to find and destroy you. Every port is a potential trap. Every sail on the horizon is a potential enemy. The feeling of freedom that once defined your life is being replaced by the constant, nagging anxiety of a fugitive. You're no longer just worried about getting lost. You're terrified of being found. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that your luck cannot last forever. The paranoia that has been your constant companion for months proves to be justified. Your luck, that fragile, fleeting thing, finally runs out. It doesn't happen in a blaze of glory, a grand battle against a worthy foe. It happens in a quiet, misty dawn in a cove where you thought you were safe. 2 naval sloops appear as if from nowhere, blocking the entrance. They have you trapped. Your captain, ever the pragmatist, knows a hopeless fight when he sees one. A few shots are exchanged, more out of pride than any real hope of victory, before your black flag is lowered for the last time. The surrender is swift and absolute. The humiliation is as sharp as any blade. The naval officers board your ship, and you're ordered to drop your weapons. You, who were once a feared predator of the seas, are now a prisoner. You're put in irons, the heavy, cold metal on your wrists and ankles a symbol of your lost freedom. Your crew, once a boisterous brotherhood, is now a sullen, silent line of captives. You are transported to a major colonial port, a place like Port Royal or Charleston, and thrown into the town jail. The cell is a block of damp stone and misery, a stark contrast to the open air and wooden warmth of your ship. The days of democracy and shared purpose are over, replaced by the solitary agony of waiting for a justice that you know will not be just. The day of your trial arrives. You're marched in chains through the streets, pelted with insults and garbage by the very townspeople you once terrorized with your presence offshore. You're brought into a courtroom, but you quickly realise it is unlike any court on land. This is a Vice Admiralty court, a special tribunal created for the express purpose of trying men like you. This is the mainstream historical fact that seals your fate. There will be no jury of your peers, no sympathetic common folk who might understand the desperation that drove you to this life. Your judges are a panel of naval commanders, wealthy merchants whose cargo you plundered, and royally appointed officials. You're being tried by your victims and your enemies. It is not a trial. It is a formality. The proceedings are a grim, efficient spectacle. The prosecutor, his voice dripping with contempt, reads a long list of your crimes. You listen as the captains and sailors from the ships you took stand up and testify against you. Their stories painting a portrait of you as a monster, a villain from a nightmare. Your own captain tries to argue that he held a privateering commission from a deposed king, a desperate legal gambit that is quickly dismissed. Then you and others are given a chance to speak. What is there to say? You could claim you were forced, that you were an unwilling participant, but the testimony of your own equal share of the plunder makes that a lie. Some men stand silent. Others, in a final act of defiance, curse the court and the king they serve. This is the grim theatre of pirate trials, a quirky footnote in legal history. Some famous pirates, like the gentleman pirate, Stede Bonnet, tried to conduct eloquent and learned defences, but to no avail. The outcome was always certain. Legal historians still debate whether the Vice Admiralty courts were a necessary tool for suppressing a clear and present danger to commerce, or if they were an instrument of state power that bypassed traditional legal protections to ensure swift and certain executions. From your position in the dock looking at the cold, hard faces of the men who are about to condemn you, the debate seems pointless. This is not justice. It is pest control. The judges confer for only a moment. Their minds were made up before you even entered the room. The lead judge, without emotion, pronounces the verdict: guilty. He then dons a black cap, a piece of formal theatre that signals a death sentence is to be passed. He speaks the ancient, chilling words, sentencing you to be taken from this place to a place of execution, there to be hanged by the neck until you are dead, dead, dead. He adds that your body, and the bodies of your crewmates, will be left to hang in chains at the harbour's entrance, a gruesome warning to any other sailors who might be tempted by the merry life. It is the ultimate cautionary tale, sponsored by the state. You are led from the courtroom, the judge's words echoing in the sudden, ringing silence of your mind. The sounds of the street outside seem distant and unreal. You are returned to your stone cell, but it is no longer a place of waiting. It is now a tomb. The great adventure is over. There is the freedom, the fighting, the feasting, the brotherhood. It has all led you here, to a short final walk to the gallows. Your part in the story of the golden age of piracy is over. In the final, quiet days in your stone cell, the world shrinks to the size of a single barred window. The fear has subsided, replaced by a strange, hollow calm. Your story is over. But in these last moments, you think about the larger story, the one you were only a small part of. You think of your brethren still out on the water, and you wonder how long they can last. You don't know it, but you're part of the final generation. The golden age of piracy, that brief, explosive era of rebellion, is coming to a close. Your capture is not a singular event. It is a symptom of the end. The reasons for the end are simple and overwhelming. The mainstream historical fact is that the governments of the world, particularly Great Britain, finally tired of the game. They stopped treating piracy as a nuisance and began treating it as a war. The naval fleets they sent were no longer just occasional patrols. They were dedicated hunting parties, commanded by determined officers with orders to eradicate you. The offer of the king's pardon, which once seemed like a lifeline, became a weapon, sowing mistrust and thinning the pirates' ranks. Your havens, the lawless ports like Nassau that were the lifeblood of your trade, were captured, sanitized, and turned into naval bases from which your hunters could operate. The ecosystem that allowed you to survive, a steady supply of vulnerable ships, and safe places to sell your plunder, has collapsed. The last of the great pirate captains, men whose names were once whispered with awe, are being hunted down one by one. Blackbeard was killed in a bloody, desperate battle in a shallow inlet. Bartholomew Roberts, perhaps the most successful pirate of all, was blasted by a grape shot from a warship off the coast of Africa, his death marking the symbolic end of an era. The pirates who aren't killed in battle are captured, just like you, and processed through the brutally efficient machinery of the Vice Admiralty courts. The war is over. You lost. So how will you be remembered? As you sit here awaiting the hangman, you're nothing but a common criminal, a failed thief whose gruesome end will serve as a warning. But that is not where your story will truly end. Historians and sociologists will continue to debate your legacy. Were you and your brethren just violent sociopaths, a plague upon the seas? Or were you something more? Were you a proto-anarchist social rebellion, a brief, doomed experiment in creating a society of equals, free from the crushing oppression of the world you fled? You created a floating democracy, a meritocracy where skill mattered more than birth, and where men of all colours and nations could be brothers. It was a brutal, violent, and deeply flawed society, but for a short time, it offered a kind of freedom that was unimaginable anywhere else on Earth. But the world will not remember that reality. It will forget the filth, the fear, the boring work, the terrible food, and the constant, grinding misery. Your story, and the stories of your comrades, will be taken, sanitized, and transformed into romance. The brutal reality will be replaced by a grand adventure. The silly costumes you never wore will become your uniform. The parrots you never owned will become your companions. The treasure you spent as fast as you could steal it will be buried on desert islands, marked with a map for a new generation of heroes to find. You, the real you, will disappear. A legend will be born in your place, a character far more charming and far less dangerous than you ever were. In a strange final irony, the state hangs your body to create a warning. But the storytellers will resurrect your spirit to create an adventure. Somewhere in the world, there are legends of a quirky, final resting place for your kind. A place like Ile Sainte-Marie in Madagascar, a supposed pirate graveyard where the last of the buccaneers could retire in peace, surrounded by their comrades, their ships rotting gently in a quiet bay. It is a comforting thought, a peaceful end that you will not have. It is likely just another myth, another story to soften the harsh truth. The truth is the gallows, the snapped rope, and the tide washing over your body at the harbour's mouth. That is the reality. The rest is just a story, drifting off to sleep. The sound of the waves on a distant shore is all that remains. The creak of the ship's timbers has faded, the shouts of the crew have fallen silent, and the terrifying thunder of the cannons has long since echoed into nothingness. The gallows and the prison cell dissolve into the soft darkness, their cold stone and splintered wood giving way to the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the deep ocean, a slow and steady heartbeat in the quiet of the night. The story is over, its sharp edges smoothed away by time, leaving only a faint whispering mist. The frantic energy of the chase, the wild joy of the taverns, the cold dread of the final verdict, all of it now just melts into a peaceful, deep and untroubled calm. There are no more sails to spot on the horizon, no more chores to be done at dawn. There is only the quiet, the stillness, and the gentle rocking of a world settling into a deep and profound slumber. Let the last images drift away like smoke, leaving your mind clear and calm, as empty and peaceful as the wide, starlit sea. Let the darkness be a soft blanket, a safe harbour at the end of a long, long journey. Rest now. The night is quiet, and all is well.